Prepare yourselves. Come on in.
This is the PowerShell Podcast. It's all about PowerShell and the PowerShell community.
Yes! That's awesome!
And now, here's your hosts, Jordan Hammond and Andrew Plaw.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the PowerShell Podcast. I'm mediocre host Jordan with excellent co-host. I'm only giving you co-host this time, Andrew Plaw. And today we have a special guest, Matt Dowst, who has done some things in PowerShell that I think he's one of our first highlights. I'm excited to hear kind of the process that goes into into your work.
Awesome. Glad to be here.
All right. So I guess instead of just tiptoeing around it, you do the PowerShell Weekly, you do a roundup of what's going on in the community, which it covers announcements, interesting articles, new modules. We used it pretty heavily when we were first starting, before we went to the weekly interview. I think you're also one of our first highlights.
Cool. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've been doing that for a few years now. I know I hit edition 100 last year at one point. But it's just a kind of a opportunity for me to give back to the community a little bit. I know it's hard to. There's so many different things to just kind of see and do and out there. So I just kind of started putting together kind of a little weekly list of things that I was learning, and it kind of grew out from there. I had a recent redesign on the site, separated it out from my main blog site, so that it makes it a little easier to search and everything. So you have all the past history and everything on there. Quite a few of your guys' episodes on there as well. So
the first time we made it was a big deal for us. It was that happened around the same time that Sean Wheeler hit us up to correct some of our documentation, and those two things. It was very validating for us. It felt like we were on the right track. It was a big deal for us. So thank you for adding us to it.
Definitely. That's what it's there for the community. So, I always tell other people, it's a hand curated list. I'm not just, searching a hashtag and reposting, it's actually things that, I found useful, but, always open to suggestions and ideas on other things. Cause obviously there's so much out there. I can't see everything every week. So, if you guys or anybody out there has any, input or things that they want to throw my way on it, please feel free.
Awesome. Matthew, can I call you Matt?
Yep.
Hey, Matt. So this is psweekly.dowst.dev is the PS Weekly thing that we're talking about here.
Yes.
And quite surprising to hear that you've done so many. And it's kind of cool because I actually hadn't been introduced to you until discovering that. How did you initially get involved in the community? How did you, what kind of inspired, hey, now I'm going to start giving back? What were you consuming?
Just, so many blogs and posts and things that I would go through on kind of a weekly basis. It kind of started with my initial blog was, through my company at Catapult Systems, just randomly writing blogs out there for things, and those kind of tended to be a little more in depth. And then a few years back, I have a OneNote that was just full of all these little snippets and things that I've collected over the years, and I was trying to figure out a good way to share that with the community. And part of it was kind of self-serving, because I'd be on Stack Exchange or Reddit, and somebody would ask a question, I'd be like, oh yeah, I have that here, let me paste that in there for you. Make it a little easier for myself to be able to even kind of find those things. So I built that out, and then as I was going through, I'd find other little interesting things that people would put. I was that's something I really want to keep record of, but I don't want to put that in my blog like it's mine. This is kind of something somebody else developed or something somebody else made, and so then I started kind of creating posts attributed to others. But then from there, it just kind of grew out as hey, we can kind of put this together, create a little weekly newsletter to put out there. I saw that there really wasn't anything else out there like that for PowerShell. I got some of those from some other, I've seen a Python one and things like that. So it's kind of, where it grew from. So
How have your skills changed as you go through every single week, consuming PowerShell stuff, kind of keeping current, kind of really getting a feel for the community and where people are with PowerShell and using it in the best way?
it helps me continually evolve, just kind of seeing the things out there. Some of my favorite things to do is, go to like PowerShell.org or Reddit and just kind of search through the week's posts, not so much looking to, contribute to them, but going through and just seeing what other people are asking and getting some tips and things like that on there. There's so many little things that you kind of pick up from there. A good example is a few weeks ago, I saw a discussion going on Reddit on what's the fastest way to create an array, out of a for each. People were going against, the array versus the list. And, somebody says, if you just put, variable equals at the beginning of the for each, it's going to just throw everything from the pipeline in there. It's like, oh, okay. And you just kind of seeing those things and kind of remembering them. And it's actually, it's helped me. I mean, obviously I'm not, going to retain everything every week, but, a couple weeks ago, somebody at work asked me a thing about the Exchange module updates. I'm like, oh, hey, I linked to that the other day. Here it is. So it makes a pretty good, finding little things to kind of help, improve my scripting and, my PowerShell that's, going on 14 years of using PowerShell. I'm still learning stuff every week, as well as, still, kind of creating that catalog really of things that I can kind of go back and reference.
I imagine it's helpful at work.
With things being posted, is a common thing. It's like, I did it so I have a back reference, and I'm just glad people find value in it. We hear that quite often.
Yeah. And nothing, it actually feels really good sometimes, when you Google a problem and the first thing that pops up is your own.
Yep.
Like, oh, I did solve that before.
I think we've all done that. I found a video that I did before that solved a problem that even watching the video, I didn't remember that I'd done it.
Yeah. Like I said,
we often tell people to do blogs to kind of keep track of what they learn, and you're definitely doing that. But it sounds like you have kind of a different knowledge management system for all your other snippets that you were using prior to blogging and that you can also kind of refer to. Do you have any tricks for OneNote? I know a handful of people who use OneNote to kind of keep track of their whole list of all their snippets and all their solutions, but you have any usage tips?
So I actually converted the OneNote into my main site. So there's the psweekly.dowst.dev, but on just the regular dowst.dev, it is just full of all the snippets that I have in there. And my reasoning behind doing that was when you wanted to share, and two, tagging. I can click on a tag that I have in there, this big cloud tag, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's that, and I wrote that site so that it is very, you can expand out and you can get some more details on there. But if you just want to go say, hey, what's the best way to split a string, and it'll go and give me some regex examples, things like that, right? You can click on that, and it's just going to give you a list of them, and you can copy exactly which ones out that you want with a click of a button. So, I like to say it's all altruistic, but it it helps me as well too. So
that's how you know it's something good, because so often the things that help you also, if you do them in a certain way, will help a bunch of other people and can lead to cool opportunities and new relationships like we're creating right here today. As you listen, audience, we are creating a new friendship with Dowst.
It's always, you think it would have gotten through to me by now that with all this, everyone's like, well, I did it for me first and you just helped other people. But then when I go to try to do something public, outside of the podcast, my thought is, well, I've done it, so that means anyone else can do it. Everyone else has done it. And I struggle getting past that barrier. So if I just look at it, it's like I'm doing it for my future reference so I don't forget and then just ignore the rest. Maybe that's, I mention all the time, maybe I need to just change my focus.
Yeah, that's a really good way of kind of putting putting it out there. I kind of had that same thought process in the past, where like if you look at my initial blogs, they are very long, detailed. And, did an entire series like way back when on Service Manager PowerShell module and how to work with that and things like that. And after a while, there's always going to be some repeat in there, but again, it's if you can kind of put it together in one spot, it makes it a little easier for yourself. And there's always, like I said, there's a million different ways to do anything. I think I remember listening to a talk. I think it was Don Jones quite a few years ago. It was like TechNet 2014 or something, and he was talking about the first like kind of scripting challenge they ever did. They opened it up to the public to comment on, and it just went crazy because everybody had a different opinion on what was the best way to do a particular thing. So I mean, even if somebody's done something similar, they may not have done it the same way, which I found quite often. So it's kind of nice to see different ways to do that. When I see all the time, it's like the file cleanups, right? Everybody wants, you can go onto any forum and there's going to be at least once a week somebody asking, how do I clean up old files? You'll find a million different ways to do it, but and you might not be doing the same thing, but seeing how that they're manipulating the data or parsing things like that, it can help you with those other things. That's kind of what I look at when I'm looking at those type posts.
I had something similar for I can't remember what the code was for, but someone made a comment. They thought I looked like I had taken code from PowerShell version 2 just by the way it looks. And overall, I just asked for him to clarify, and he came up one part where I could have shortened up the first and make it cleaner, and I did follow those through. But the next part was just him not understanding what I was doing. I was following a lot of the PowerShell for Speed by, Andrew's gonna make fun of me for forgetting his name because
Josh King.
Yeah, I was following Josh King's example on PowerShell for Speed, which was a faster version. It just doesn't look as intuitive as I guess if you read PowerShell regularly, but it was faster. So I think we both came away with the advantage. We did it different ways, and we both came away with improvements. I thought it was pretty handy.
Yep, definitely, especially when you start getting into pipelines and all that, those other things.
Apologies to Josh King. I talk him up all the time, and then I freeze once the spotlight's on.
No, please forget more people's names and the names of things, because then I get a couple of excuses to forget. It is live, right? I mean, come on.
That's what we're going to have the first thing. Kelly, take it out. Remember?
So
yeah, go ahead.
Tell you the best thing I ever did was create I bought a gaming keyboard, and I programmed some of the macros in there to be able to, type out a custom PS object for me, and shell it, or a list, array, and just because of those things I type all the time. But I hate trying to remember, system dot. It's like, okay, what? There's my macro.
And when you approach things and create solutions and tools like that, you don't have to remember everything, and you don't have to force your brain to remember all this stuff. You just have a system and you just do what you do. And because your website and because of whatever other macros and what other tools in your tool belt, things are easier and you're able to do more and be a huge resource to your coworkers because, being current on all this stuff and having awareness of this database kind of thing that you created, helps improve things at work even.
Yep, definitely.
I really need to blog some more.
I've been lacking on there too, but
well, I think you've been writing some other things lately.
Yeah.
Tell us about this awesome book project you have.
Yeah. So, guys, it's been it's a year now since started to conceptualize to actually write the book. So, wrote a book, Practical Automation with PowerShell. And the focus that I wanted to take on the book is, to really take somebody who knows PowerShell, but then take it beyond, a basic command line language or scripting language, and show really how to use it as an automation platform. Like if you look at, the Microsoft documentation for PowerShell, it says that it's an automation platform, which it is. So it really, I wanted to kind of teach how to think like an automator. It's a lot of the code examples in there are things that you can use right now in your current job, but it also go through the process of why did I write it that way? What was the purpose behind building it out? Kind of going through conceptualizing like building blocks. The example I always use is automating the creation of a virtual machine, right? You can there's that fine balancing act of, okay, am I going to go ahead and create a million different variables to get all the different things in there? Well, you just ended up recreating the wizard that exists. And so kind of talking through of hey, what can you look up, what can you create, and then how can you kind of build it out, right? So maybe your first part is just creating the VM in Hyper-V or VMware or wherever, right? And then from there you can go and still manually install the OS. Well, then you can then take that step further, kind of give that to the team. Okay, the next step is I'm going to start automating the installation of the OS, right? Okay, now that I've got that part automated, let me automate the configuration of that OS. And so you don't have this massive project of creating VMs that takes you 6-9 months to anybody start getting use out of. You can start getting usage right away, and kind of helps you see how the things are being used and how they're being created, right? And that way, if things need to change, you can kind of stay adaptable and things like that. And that's a big part of it is things change. We want to adapt. PowerShell's been around forever. PowerShell's not going anywhere, right? But a good example is you have like a web front end for something. PowerShell's not really known for that, but what you can do is use PowerShell to get that data, right? So you have a SharePoint site. You can create a form in a SharePoint site in a matter of minutes, and then just have the PowerShell go grab that information, do it all at once. You have, and then say your company moves to ServiceNow or Salesforce, right? Recreate that same form in Salesforce. Just have that same exact PowerShell script. Just grab that data. All you got to do is change that one little intermediary in there to kind of help grow, and keep everything running smoothly.
That sounds like some practical solutions, to be honest with you. And I can appreciate that.
I'm weak at making my own functions, so I'll probably be reading this book at some point. Like I throw it all into one script, and I don't care how readable. There's no functions. I definitely need to get better at that part of it.
That's chapter 2, man.
I like this book because from what you've described, it fits like a great audience for this is the type of person who's leveraging PowerShell, maybe doesn't work at a place with a ton of established best practices and high level of talent and experience that has already done a lot of these things you'll probably be going through. So it kind of enables someone to take what they have done with PowerShell and to really repave how they do everything at work and to take things to, again, the next level of kind of where you should be with the automation platform of PowerShell.
Yep, definitely. And that's, a lot of that kind of comes from, my experiences over the years. Working as a consultant, I got to go into a lot of different companies and see a lot of different ways, that things are done. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a place that they're scared of automation, not for cost or afraid someone's going to lose their job or anything like that. Which, side note on that, anywhere I've ever automated, nobody's ever lost their job over it, but many people have gotten promoted over it. So, but they're afraid of automation because somebody wrote some script 10 years ago that nobody knows how to change or maintain or update or do anything to, and they've been kind of they get kind of stuck in there, and they get kind of scared of that. So that's where really try to introduce the modular aspect of things, or don't use Excel as a database. It's really easy to have PowerShell talk to SQL.
So my experience with automation at the job previous was it didn't cost me my job, but I grew bored enough to look for a different job, and then the automation got me that job. So
Yep.
it was pretty siloed, and I'd automated so much of it out, and I was looking to help or automate other, and no one. They were so protective. No one let me. One person told me you can't do that in PowerShell. I'm still mad about it. It's been 8 years, and I'm still furious telling me you can't do it in PowerShell. Of course I can do it in PowerShell. But so at the end, everyone was working hard, redoing the same tasks, and I was sitting there bored, and I couldn't expand out, and I wasn't allowed to go anywhere, and I started looking. So it didn't cost me my job directly, but it definitely led to me going somewhere else.
So yeah, I guess it always helps. I mean, that's kind of how I ended up in the role that I'm in. I started out as a system center guy. Working, config manager, service manager, ops manager, and it just got to be. I was like, you know what? I'm doing the same thing over and over at every single place I'm going. Let me write a script to do it, and kind of grew out from there. And for the past 4 years now, I've been the chief architect on our managed automation team here at Quisitive.
Now, in your consulting, and you're implementing some automation, some cool PowerShell stuff, do you ever have to teach your clients PowerShell or kind of get them up to speed?
Usually not. I mean, most system administrators that I've worked with know at least enough PowerShell to get themselves going. All right, but we try to make it so that it's nobody ever has to actually touch PowerShell unless they're going to be making a change or an update to it, right? So you can, host those PowerShell scripts in, Azure Automation and just have somebody go in and enter the prompts that they want, or as I mentioned earlier, have it go out to a SharePoint site, things like that, they can then, just enter the forms, and there's something on the back end that runs and grabs it. Some of them, like to kind of dig around in there and get going. We had one customer with an old service desk software that at the time it was still in Silverlight, and we wrote a PowerShell module to interface with the SDK on it, and the company was like, "Hey, can we get a copy of that?" Send it over to them. Let them have their own little PowerShell module on there. So
it's a good starting point. They can always build on it.
Yep. But yeah, there's some some customers I'll sit down with and work through a PowerShell script one at a time if that's how they want to do it. Either that or there was a lot more common back in the SMA days, if y'all remember those, but in between Orchestrator and Azure Automation, everything was written in PowerShell workflow, and that was a learning curve for quite a few people. But
I want to go back to an earlier thing you said about automation, because it is such a common fear. It's like automating to lose, like, will take away jobs or things like that. But you said it does never happen, but it's actually led to promotions for the people who you're providing automation for.
Yep. Yeah, so we've had it. I mean, quite a few times. Like I said, I run a managed automation team here at Quisitive, and we automate numerous things. The most common being user onboarding and offboarding, server patching, or just maintenance of usually an Azure-based or cloud-based offerings. But we've gone into places where, I mean, their processes to onboard a person were just absolutely ridiculous. It was taking them weeks to do, and it is because no place ever has anybody whose job it is to onboard. Unless you're, a Fortune 100 company, you're not having that guy that's sitting there just creating AD accounts all day long, right? So it was really waiting on somebody else to be able to get in there and do that. But we did have, one customer who they had a lot of, they buy other companies and sell other companies, so there's their onboarding is not steady, but it comes in huge waves. So they really had to keep somebody around to just, they couldn't give individual more responsibilities because they kind of had to wait around for things to, when one of those major surges came. But once we were able to automate that process and take it down to 10 minutes, as opposed to 10 days, then she ended up get a promotion. I think moved out to started being able to work remotely and everything like that as well too. So that's happened quite a few times.
Yeah. If you are locked into doing, I don't want to say busy work, but remedial tasks like that constantly with no chance for growth, you're going to get stuck there. If you can show the initiative to remove that and not have to do it, that's a big win. That's a big plus for you.
Definitely.
It sounds like your automation kind of opened the door for that to be possible in their environment.
We see that time and time again, where it's just somebody had this responsibility. They don't really realize how much time it sucks away from them. Creating an AD account, that takes a couple minutes. Yeah, but you have to stop what you're doing. You have to go over there and you have to create it. All those type of things, and so that's really helped kind of through a lot of those processes. And the other ones is things you may not always remember, right? That's one of the things that I talk about. Is like you may have a task that you only have to do once a month or once a year, but it's kind of repetitive or kind of has a lot of steps to it. You may not get that automatic ROI on it, but it's definitely going to make things cleaner and easier for you. Every time you have to do it. A really cheesy example is I have a PowerShell script that I run that takes anything in my mailbox that's over 6 months old and just throws it into a archive for me. It's so I don't have to sit there and just thumb through things, but or if you have large data sets that you need to go through. Sometimes it probably took me a little longer to write that PowerShell to parse it to read it, but you know what? I know I'm not making mistakes now.
So I'm curious with the mailbox one. Is that something where you have to have more admin to open up the mailbox, or could you use it to just target your specific mailbox with your credentials if you weren't an admin?
So I'm actually not an admin. So I use the Outlook com objects.
Okay.
And do that. So, I got quite a few of them. I don't know if I've shared them out yet, but I definitely need to if I haven't. Wrote one. I get so many alerts throughout the day that I don't want to create a rule to have all these alerts clear out of my inbox, because then I won't see them. But at the same time, when I come in the morning, I have 70 of the same alert. I can look once and I don't have to sit there and hit that button over and over again. So I have a PowerShell that just goes and says, okay, move these over here for me real quick. I've seen them in my inbox. I'm happy now, but I still get that notification on my phone, unlike I would with a rule, things like that. So some of the ways I've helped myself stay organized.
I have a bit of a question about, I don't know exactly how I want to phrase it, but it's kind of related to, you're mentioning that some of these, maybe a customer had that pretty long onboarding process, and you're mentioning automating some other things for people, and it leads to them maybe more embracing automation and stuff like that. So how big of a factor do you find company culture and how they approach making changes and visibility and like being aware that, hey, this person's spending 6 hours a week creating new accounts? Like, how a big of a factor, where do you feel like culture plays into that?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of, it plays into it a lot, but it never has to impact you, I guess is a good way to put it. So one of the philosophies that I learned early on with going out to different customers and trying to help automate them is a lot of them don't want to change what their process is, right? So if you can fit the automation to their process, obviously you never want to automate a broken process. You just at that point you have to be honest. Okay, this process is broken. We need to. But as I mentioned, and like I said, I talk about a lot in my book is those building blocks, right? So there's a great example is a customer I went to help them automate their server patching, and they have all sorts of, they have Oracle and DBA and AS400s and all these other things that require all these services to be started and stopped in particular orders. Certain machines have to be rebooted in particular orders. So we went in there and we helped. We were doing the initial discovery stuff. Talked with the Windows guys, and they're going through, telling me all the stuff. Here's what we do with our SQL servers. Here's what we do with our Exchange servers. And then the Linux guys were like, "No, you're not touching my machines. Just no." And so we're like, all right, fine. So we went and we automated the Windows servers, and we what we did is because they, to do their patching, they would all get on a phone call. All the Windows guys, all the Linux guys, all the database guys, everyone would get on a big phone call. Everyone would take everything down. Servers would patch. Everyone would sit there while they patched, bring everything back up, turn stuff back on, do their testing, things like that. All right, and after like the first 3 weeks, where the guys, one person from the Windows team would get on and say, "All right, I'm pushing the button," and they would call them back a couple hours later. So they were able to, they still got on that call. They still followed their processes, stopped the services, did things like that. But we were able to integrate it in with their process. We didn't take over their process, say, no, you can't do that. You have to do it this way. By going in there and melding it to their process, that kind of the rest of the helped open up the rest of the team. And a few months later, the Linux guys were like, "Hey, I want to start taking a look at some of our things," and then it was like, all right, well, we'll take over the Jenkins part of stopping the services. All right, and they were still doing the patching, and then a few months later, they're like, all right, well, that Jenkins part's kind of working well. Why don't y'all start doing the patching? So kind of integrated into the process, and we're able to kind of streamline that. Now some people, I'll always tell them, it's like, if you're automating, this is a perfect time to change your change your processes, right? It's like, I'm the consultant. I'll be the bad guy. You can go tell the company that I said so if you really want to, and you're afraid to change your processes. But you don't have to. This is kind of what I'm saying.
I think that a great way, if you are one of those people inside a company that's a little rigid, a little hesitant to change, and you don't have a position where you can just dictate everything that is happening, is to get an external source of authority to not only increase your confidence that the way you're approaching things and what you're suggesting is legit, but also to be able to bring in whatever resource, like maybe the practical automation with PowerShell book that you've written, or maybe some other talks. But if you're able to bring that in, you may have a little bit more success with actually getting change and showing what works and maybe highlighting some of the benefits.
Yep, definitely. And like I said before, you don't have to have this huge out of the gate automation project. You can start small and build upon it, and if you build it appropriately, that's as easy as just adding another module in. There you go. Now you're kind of building it out the other way, and it's kind of the approach that we've always taken.
Nice. And I think something that I found trying to move towards a more automation approach is to be verbal with the stuff that it's doing. Like, let people make it visible, the success that it's having. Don't just keep all the work that you're doing in private, kind of in whatever way, share what's happening with the team so they can be like, oh, wow, this is really cool. This is working well. Look at all this efficiency and time savings. We should see what else he has in mind. Mm-hmm. Or she has in mind for some other automations they want to bring in.
Definitely, and that's a good one to remember too when you're dealing with like a CFO. I've had CFOs like, I don't care. I'm paying somebody this much, and if it gets done in 10 minutes versus an hour, I don't care. But then when you go to them and say, hey, if it gets done in 10 minutes, then they could do these other things for the other 50 minutes, and be able to show that ROI on there is big to a company. I don't. That's the number one thing. No matter how scared somebody, a company is of automation, or how hesitant they may be, if you show them ROI, they're gonna. All right, that kind of opens up some executive and C-level eyes.
And it kind of makes you an asset as the one responsible for creating that ROI.
Definitely.
That's fun stuff. To me, this is really, at least for my journey in PowerShell, this is kind of what it's all about, is taking that next step, learning how to do things better, changing culture at work, making it so if you're staying at your current job for the long term, it's going to be a better environment to do things in a better way, to free you up, to not be working on tech debt all the time. Very cool. I definitely got to pick this book up.
Getting away from that tech debt. And, that's another good point too, is, and that's something that I cover in the book as well, is, like using source control. There's so many places that they have a share, or they have a OneDrive with, all these PS1 scripts in, and the lines are starting to blur, between, kind of like system administrators, and the developers and things like that. But, even if you consider yourself to be a strict sysadmin, right, you can still get benefit from using GitHub. Go create a free account and get stuff in there, and it's easy, it's simple, and oh man, it just makes your life so much easier when you can go see what a script was 10 minutes ago versus what it is now, and all those things. And that'll help you and your company to continue that growth, set that platform.
Okay. So earlier you were mentioning the kind of most sysadmins are able to run some PowerShell. So it sounds like they're being exposed to it, or there's some expectation of being able to run commands, which is fair. I'm my perspective is a bit skewed because I consume too much PowerShell and have been using it for too long. But from your perspective, it sounds like there's that audience of people who haven't fully embraced automation, who haven't gotten to that next level with PowerShell. And this is probably not a question you can answer, which is, how do we reach them? Because in my opinion, that's how we need to kind of go about improving the security of many organizations, is they need to work towards automation, work towards eliminating tech debt, work towards empowering their admins to actually administer at scale, and blah, 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 all that kind of thing. Like, I think as a world, we have reasons to want that. And also as podcast hosts and as someone who's writing a book about practical automation. But how do you see any ways to kind of accelerate the process of spreading this automation goodness throughout the sysadmin world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest way is to just kind of, give them the opportunity to learn it and see it. And, I don't want to say somebody is like intimidated by command line, right? Because I mean, everybody knows how to IP config or run those type of things. But if you get somebody and you see them clicking through the GUI wizard 20 times, doing the same thing over and over and over again, show them, hey man, you can do this with like 2 lines of script. It's like, well, I don't even know how to do this. All you have to do is just, you don't have to remember even how to type that. Just save that as a PS1 file. Next time you need to do that, call that file back up again, and and kind of just show that was like I said, it was a blog series I did years ago. It was on this service manager PowerShell, because that PowerShell module was very intimidating, because the way that service manager is structured is you have like work items, and then they break down in all these different types. You need to remember all these names. There's like one command to like get work item. You have to know which type of work item it is that you want, whether it's incident, problem, things like that. And that's where a lot of people started. I don't like to do all that.
Service manager is a ticketing system kind of thing.
It's a part of the System Center suite. It's a ticketing system. But you're just kind of showing them of, hey, you wanted that list of open incidents. Here's one line of code you can do. And now there they all are, scrolling scrolling down your screen. It's not, once you conceptualize it, it's a lot simpler. Looking at that code can be, daunting, but once you kind of take back and look at it and see what it's doing, then it becomes logical, right? Then you can just say, hey, I can where it says incident right there, I can just change that to say, problem or service request. Yeah, and now you have, and then you kind of build upon that. And I know Microsoft's tried to push it a lot with like the Exchange Online. There's things that you can only do through PowerShell now.
Yeah, and MS Graph I think is a big step towards making it more mandatory for an Azure workspace.
Yeah.
So one area I did this poorly, and that was I was always so aggressive in trying to make people adopt PowerShell that it was like I was at a party trying to show them pictures of my kids and no one cared. And what the best way to go about it is show the value constantly and be ready to teach when they show interest, but you can't force it. If someone doesn't want to do it, then they're not going to learn it anyway.
Yep.
So just show value and wait. I had a buddy of mine he's my future boss, if I'm being honest. It's always been that way since he first started in IT. Very resistant to PowerShell. I could never get him to pick it up. And a few months ago, he reached out to me because he was struggling with things. And it started off with he had redone a script I had written years ago to kind of make it work for a new environment. And then every week I would check in and work on the code together. And it went from he just asking questions to where he was making attempts at it. And then we just do some cleanup. And by the end of it, he seemed genuinely excited for PowerShell, which is a big win for the community. But when I tried to force him, it was never going to happen. You had to wait for him to want the value.
Yeah. It's interesting because the company that I work for, we have an infrastructure practice and we have an app dev practice, and my role, I kind of straddle the line between the two. So I see it coming from both sides too. The developer is like, you don't need to be using C# or Python to do that. Here's one line of PowerShell for you to be able to. We had a third-party ticketing system with an API, a REST API to get it. One of our guys was is C# developer, so he wrote like a web app to be able to pull that data. I'm like, man, invoke REST method, and then pass those parameters, and you're done. No compiling or anything else needed, and that really helps them pick that up as well.
Dude, shout out REST APIs, shout out invoke REST method. Love them. Always got to highlight them. If you aren't really using APIs yet, definitely recommend it.
Yep, that's definitely the kind of the wave of the future. Especially with you guys were just mentioning with the Microsoft Graph and all that. Basically everything. Your PowerShell modules are going to be just API calls, wrappers. They're getting that way.
Yeah, and I think going from never consuming APIs to consuming APIs on automation is like a phase. Like if you're not familiar with it, you will have to learn quite a bit, and you'll run into some hiccups, and it won't quite. There's that learning phase. At least for me, there was.
Yeah, that was a big thing. I talked to a lot of people when I was writing the book to find out what people were interested in learning, and everyone's APIs are the kind of the number one thing that people were always saying. And it's like you could write a book on pretty much every API out there, right? But if you learn, and it's cause the pain of it is there's no standardization on how you authenticate them, right? But once you get past that authentication stage, then it just becomes rinse and repeat. It's JSON, it's XML, it's you're getting that data, you're talking back and forth. Most of them are pretty well documented nowadays as well too. So, but we do cover some parts of that in the book as well. Just basics. Here's how you connect to an API. Here's how you bring that data back. Pass it between different ones and things like that.
Nice. Yeah, there's also a Gainesville meetup next month where Devin Rich from Utah, if Jordan, shout out to you, Utah, he'll be talking about web APIs and all the kind of different authentication methods and all that. But yeah, to anyone out there who is in the early stages of their REST API interactions, I definitely recommend pushing through those initial hurdles and figuring out how it all works and start taking advantage of it. Because especially in the current day, there's just so much you can do, and it really enables you to, at least for me, it feels more like build, I don't want to say applications necessarily, but like really actually do things, because you can tie into other resources that you can maybe develop with something else. Yeah, it's very adaptable.
Yeah, we definitely. I mean, it's great to be able to kind of bring all that stuff together into one place as well too. Working on some things where getting Azure alerts out of Azure and then comparing them against what got sent to like PagerDuty or other platforms. Grab things out of SharePoint, grab things out of ServiceNow, grab things out of Salesforce, put them all together into one script, and you can really help kind of clean things up and and get your data synchronized and keep everything clean.
Very cool. I'm excited to hear what it's like for someone to go from not having gone through the book and having a lot of the stuff be fresh to them, and then go through actually where they are at the end of it, and kind of how that plays for them. Because I can imagine this is kind of a bit of a catalyst, or at least could be for quite a few people and different organizations.
Yeah, definitely. And it's written in such a way that you can go in and you can read any given chapter as a standalone chapter. So if you're not interested in writing secure scripts, which I mean you should be, but a lot of people are already familiar with this secrets management module and things like that. You can just skip right on to the SQL stage, or you can skip right to the cloud stage, or right to the front end form chapter, things like that. So you can really kind of just take it as you need it.
I think
like
secrets is that's a big one. If you're not familiar with secrets, that's to me the main thing to know right now, because that's going to be your biggest hurdle, especially with recent events and breaches being involved with clear text passwords.
Yes.
Secrets is your defense, both to be allowed to continue to do it, as well as not putting your passwords in clear text.
Yep. And I spent quite a bit of time talking, because that's beyond the we don't want to get stuck in an automation thing. The second thing is the security aspect of it. And I actually talk in there about how you can go talk to your security team and your CISOs about here's what we're doing to secure our scripts. Here's whether you're using code signing, where you're using the secret modules, keeping things in key vaults, using just-in-time administration, or least required privileges, all those type of things. You go to a CISO with that, they're gonna listen a lot better than where you just go, oh, hey, I need global admin. I need this to be a domain admin.
And I think that if you take pride in your work and you're trying to be in this career for a long time, you should strive to do things in the most secure way, because your name will be associated with something. If you didn't do kind of what you should have, later on it could come up. It's better to do things the right way and be a little bit proud of your work, not ashamed and fearful of what you've done in the past.
Definitely. And then when it comes to security, especially, don't get any tech debt on security. You get that right from the start.
Yeah, especially as a consultant, but definitely security is important, people. And a lot of the people listening, well, really everyone is responsible for it. So let's all take it serious together.
Yes.
I know things aren't perfect, but we can make it better.
If I'm being honest, I did a webcast on PowerShell security not that long ago, and really all I did was steal everything in Andrew's blog and talk about it.
Oh, for secrets?
For secrets, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot to PowerShell, and the visibility, you can get into it.
Yeah, we talk about a lot, it's like securing your platforms, right? So, a big thing is, if you have these secrets saved inside your platform, right? If you're using, Control M, Jenkins, Azure Automation, whatever, it's secret vaults, things like that. Set up 2 environments. Set up a dev environment that talks to these machines over there, and then have your prod environment with your credentials that need to be really secure, and control the access to that environment. Don't let somebody just go in there and be able to write scripts and pull those credentials down.
Yeah, that's important stuff right there.
I guess there's nothing with almost any mistake. There's they're taking ownership and working through being part of the solution is good enough. If it's a mistake in security, I think there's not a lot of coming back from that.
It's just, I hope that people aren't super overworked and also have the expectation of doing things properly while someone's yelling at them while they're answering tickets and someone's walking in the front door. I can imagine a lot of very toxic environments where like insecure things can just, when everything smells like, anyways, if things are bad, I can imagine some bad things just transpire out of that.
And I'm very much, of the mindset too, hey, if something went wrong, admit it, fix it, and move on. If I'm working with a company and they're trying to hide a breach or something like that, and that's automatically gonna make me not trust them on anything ever again.
And I think a lot of what we're talking about, we're trying to change cultures sort of a little bit, and building trust is part of that, which kind of goes back into the security thing. Do things in a trustworthy way if you're really trying to make lasting change and make things better.
Learn certificates and secrets, and then we don't have to worry about passwords getting leaked anymore.
So going a kind of different direction, and I'm just kind of curious because I don't know too much about you, but you found yourself doing this PowerShell Weekly thing for a couple of years. Now you've taken on the huge project of writing a freaking book. What do you hope to get from your career or from this, or are you just kind of like enjoying where things are and seeing what happens, or do you have any kind of concrete goals for what you want to maybe accomplish?
No, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the kind of the way that things are going. I enjoy working in PowerShell. I enjoy automating, and I enjoy problem solving, I guess is the best way to put that. So that's the when I as I mentioned, I started out with the Quisitive, or formerly Catapult, 11 years ago. I was a system center consultant, and they've kind of helped me grow and say, hey, you know what, that's this automation stuff is kind of taken off. We're building that out, and really just being able to kind of go in different places and see the way that other companies do things. It's not always like me going in there like, oh, I'm the subject matter expert. It's going in there and it's every customer I go to, I learn something new, right? And I love to learn, and I love to problem solve, and I love to share that knowledge. My wife always kind of jokes with me. She's just, her favorite thing of the day is when I come out of my office and be like, hey, you want to know what I learned today? And just tell her some random fact, and she gets a kick out of it. So as long as I can keep coming up with new things to do, and making my wife smile when I come out of the office, I'm pretty happy.
So getting the kick out of it is fun because my wife is pretty far into marketing, and we will always talk about our day and not understand a thing that each other is saying, but we're just excited that the other one's excited about it.
Yes.
There's like a whole conversation where we talk about everything we did, and none of it lands because we're just in different worlds on that. So, but it's just the conversation.
Yep. Yeah. It's fun sharing someone else's enjoyment. Like when my son's obsessed with marbles at the moment. So I've marbles and fire alarms. So I've learned about everything there is to know about those two things.
Well, now I got to combine them somehow.
Yes, there we go.
That's interesting. A pretty cool journey though, because it doesn't sound like you kind of sought out expecting to, write a book and do this other kind of thing. Now that you've finished the book or are finishing it, are you in the period of like, definitely not going to commit to any books for a few years, definitely going to recharge? Or are you like, okay, I could do another one. Like that was enjoyable. Where are you with things?
So I enjoyed the writing process. I don't know if my wife and kids enjoyed it as much as I did. Once I finally finished the writing process of it, I remember sitting there on a Saturday morning, just hanging out with my kids, and my son looking over me. He's like, "Dad, why aren't you working? It's Saturday." He's like, "Well, what about your book? I don't have anything to do today. Give me a break. Let me take some time." So, I mean, it's definitely it's quite a bit of commitment to it. I can definitely see expanding upon the current one. Like I said, there's 14 chapters in there. Each one of them completely standalone on different things, and there's just so much to it. It's some things you can only kind of scratch the surface on. I really like to kind of delve down and kind of work on that. But I'll definitely be working on some blogs. I'm working on a blog series right now on how I actually automated the writing of my automation book. So there's a lot of little things in the writing process that didn't account for. One of the things that absolutely killed me was when a book's going to be printed, there can't be more than 76 characters on a line. So how PowerShell can get pretty verbose. Trying to get all your lines down to 76. And so I wrote a PowerShell script that actually pulled the PowerShell out of my book, checked the line spacing, checked the indentions made, everything, and then sync that against GitHub to ensure that if somebody wants to just go look at the code behind it, it's all the same, in each place. So there's definitely a lot more work to it than anticipated, but I definitely wouldn't say it was my last book, but I'm definitely gonna be taking at least a few months off afterwards.
I think you're allowed.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. You sound pretty disciplined to be able to handle writing an entire book and enjoy the process. So kudos to that. You've definitely figured out your writing capabilities more than most.
Yeah. It's definitely a learning experience. My wife's an English major, so I've always had a editor at home, but
Nice.
Dealing with actual editors was a little different than dealing with my wife.
I've run the numbers. I end up with at least 2 extra commas per sentence.
Yeah, or in the wrong spots, or
Hey, I don't know where they go. I just throw in some commas just to make sure I got them.
Oh, well, I have a question. So I see that you're not on Discord. Do you ever go to any conferences, any user groups, any interaction in that area, and any interest in doing more?
I'm definitely always interested in doing more. I'm here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so I'm on the board of the Dallas-Fort Worth System Management User Group here. Unfortunately, I haven't ever made the Dallas PowerShell group because they hold their meetings on Saturday mornings, and I coach my daughter's soccer team, and our games are on Saturday mornings. So I haven't made down there, but yeah, I've talked with the New York guys, the Southampton guys, always looking for other opportunities. Try to get to conferences when I can. The company hasn't always been the best about letting people go unless you're a speaker, and
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I love speaking. I love like I said, I love sharing my knowledge with the world, and going out and doing that. I haven't been able to do that in the last year because I've been committed to writing the book, but definitely looking to kind of start getting out there some more again.
So if you reach out to James Petty, you'll make his week.
Okay.
Yeah, the CFP for PowerShell Summit is open.
Yes. Saw that.
I mean, this guy, you wrote a book on practical automation with PowerShell. I think you should see your audience, interact with people.
We're making the hard sell.
I'm sorry. I want to meet the guy.
It would behoove you.
I do need to get on Discord more often. I believe I'm logged on. I've logged in a couple times. I'm mainly on Twitter and Reddit. But
I saw you on Reddit. I'm scared of Reddit. They've never done anything too bad, but I don't know.
I always say if you want to know what's wrong with your script, post it on Reddit.
It does seem like the most finicky group of the social medias. Does Reddit still fall into social? I don't understand where the distinction falls off.
I think most people consider it social media, although you can be anonymous on it.
Yeah. Posts and comments, right? You post something, people comment, just different threading a little bit. Yeah, I think that you could definitely make a good CFP. Honestly, you could just choose anything. You got so much content that you've done. A lot of things to choose from.
Here we're making the hard push, and I don't think either you nor I have submitted anything to James either. So
we're doing our best, okay?
We had some ideas, I believe. We just need to work them out, right? Yeah. I don't want to dive into that. If James is listening, we might. I don't know. Mind your business, James.
No, I still have it flagged. Not what you do.
Right. Well, I think we've come to the point that all of our guests dread the most. And it's where we ask a series of questions that just tax even the wisest of PowerShell users to the very extent of the knowledge. Each question more difficult. We call this segment Common Parameters. I don't think we named other segments, but we've named this one.
I'm sweating a little bit now.
Yeah, and Steph, are you ready for the first one?
Sure.
What's one time something went wrong while on the job, and how did you handle it? And what did you learn from it?
So there's a couple. One of the ones, I wouldn't necessarily say it went wrong, but it grew wrong. Is a few years ago, I had a boss who, we wanted to automate the process of doing estimations and work breakdowns and things like that. As I was going through collecting the data, he's like, "Well, just put it in Excel for now. And that'll be your kind of skeleton, and then we can move it to something better later." You know what? That thing is still running in Excel, and I still get random emails about the macros in the background on it. And, so don't ever make anything in Excel with Excel back.
Is this the scripting version of fix it in post?
Yes.
And then there was no post.
Yeah, basically. The old saying to errors to human to really mess things up takes a computer. That's that can be with automation as well too. As I mentioned earlier, the biggest thing is if you mess something up, admit it and fix it, and get it going. There's I remember one time I reversed the permissions on a mailbox offboarding to where the person that was being offboarded got the permission to the manager's mailbox instead of the other way around, which nobody ever caught on to because the accounts were just automatically disabled at that point, right? It didn't seem to be a big deal until somebody got rehired and it got turned back on. But we got that call. We were able to go back in, look at the code. The first thing I did, when they said, "Hey, so and so got permissions to this other person's mailbox," is I looked at the code and I said, "Well, they shouldn't have." And so I was able to go into source control and see if there was any changes to the code that may have caused that reversal. There wasn't. It just turned out that somebody put the parameters in the wrong way. But having that log and being able to go back and say, "Oh yeah, this happened," but every other account that's been happened to is sitting there disabled. So we were able to basically flip the script and have it run back through and go and fix everything that we had, instead of just, like, oh, that's, just assume that nobody's ever going to get, rehired again. Go through, just fix it. It took us, probably an hour to realize the mistake, and another 30 minutes to write a script to get it done, and the client was happy. Obviously nothing was breached. It's one of those weird situations, right? You're never going to notice something that's given and then automatically disabled at the same time, right? That's how that kind of slips through. But yeah, just fix it.
There you go. Fix it is the big one.
Yeah, my very first boss in IT, I remember going into his office one time and being like, I broke SharePoint, or back then it was WSS. And he just looked at me and goes, fix it. So I went back in my office and I fixed it.
There you go. That's the leadership. All right.
Yeah, when it comes to errors in scripts, I'm like, that vehicles have safety recalls all the time. So it's like, if they can't, humans make mistakes. Nothing is that easy. It's hard. Things are hard.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jordan.
All right. We're up in the game now. We start off. I actually always feel like we have this switch. Like, it gets easier and easier, but that's. Yeah, I'm going to keep going with the bit. With your knowledge now, what's one tip you would give your younger self when you're first starting out in IT?
Maybe not to my younger self, because I'm pretty stubborn sometimes, but I always like to learn how things work instead of just how to make it work. But the one thing I would say to my younger self is, I might make some other people listen to this cringe as well, but embrace your project managers. I remember starting out and being like, I don't want to go to a 15-minute stand-up every day. This is going to be a huge waste of my time. And, I could spend that time working instead of writing user stories, or, why do I got to keep, but over time I've learned, to kind of embrace it. The project managers are there because they know how to build those systems and those projects, and you don't have to do it. There was a point where I actually lost my project manager, and I was like drowning, trying to keep up with, all the changes that we need to make and make the changes at the same time. Actually became is can be 2 full-time jobs. So, use that to your advantage.
If you keep up to date with a project manager, they're going to clear roadblocks for you. If you keep them out of the loop, they're just going to assume what the roadblocks are, and you're not always going to like the result.
And you can let them be your bulldog for you. Go chase down the things that you need. They'll go deal with the executives and everything like that. It's just great.
All right, well, last one. This is the one that sends people into nightmares. I've heard for months after. What are your 3 favorite modules?
I thought a lot about that.
Promo your modules. Just promo yours.
Well, to be honest, so I'll promote one of mine. PS Notes is the one I wrote. And again, it's the snippet concept of, I got tired of switching between Azure subscriptions all the time, so wrote a little snippet that does it quickly for me, and it lets you save those snippets and then assign them keywords. All right, so I can just type in AZCon in my console, and it will pop me up a whole prompt on connecting to my Azure environments, or I can just type in cred, and it's going to automatically do the get credentials, save it to a variable for me, do all that kind of stuff. So just saving myself some time in there. But some of the I thought I would talk about some of the ones that everybody uses DBA scripts and PNP modules and those type of ones. I probably spend 80% of my day in the Azure modules here lately, but some of the ones that I've been finding a lot of use for here lately is there's one's a PSPX, It's oh man, I'm drawing a blank on. Right, I want to say it was Doug, but it allows you to take Markdown and run that as a PowerShell. So
It's Doug.
yeah, okay, awesome. I spend a lot of time in Azure DevOps and all these different things. I would love if notebooks and things like that supported PowerShell a little bit more. They don't. This is a really good way to be able to share things amongst your team. To be able to say, hey, go, run this, and they can pull those scripts down and run them real time on their machines. So you're not having to, if you don't have cloud environments and things like that they need to go across. Another one that I've been using a lot here lately is VS Team. So one thing that absolutely drives me crazy in DevOps is you can create a template of a item, but it will not include any of the child items. So you can create a backlog item and then all the tasks to be able to do it. A lot of them are very repetitive. I'm not going to click 20 times to make each one of them. So use that one to quickly populate my backlogs. And then another one recently that came out is curl to PS, as we were talking earlier about REST APIs. Pretty much every REST API you go to and you look at the documentation, it's going to be written for curl. And this guy, oh man, now I'm drawing a blank on the name again too.
The Wolf.
Yes.
I can't remember it.
Yeah.
Poch Wolf.
Yeah, Poch Wolf. Yes, wrote the curl to PS, which you can take those curl examples and transfer them to PS. And there were some that I was working with that broke it, and I sent him over a little note, said, hey, here's what I was doing, and he got that thing updated the next day, pretty much. So those are some ones. I do have one more. Personally, I've been playing with the PowerShell lately, which is kind of fun. It's a Spotify add-on for PowerShell. So I've been going through and kind of just playing around, creating myself different playlists, and trying to use it to discover new music. And because if you use the Spotify daily mixes, you're going to get those same 20 songs over and over and over again. It's like, hey, let's take this artist and find something a little more deep in their catalog and create me a playlist for it and play around with it. So those are always kind of fun little side projects playing around with.
It's funny. It was the first blog I wrote here was building the hipster playlist out of Spotify. I didn't realize I could make a whole module out of it. I just did it for fun.
Yep.
It's fantastic.
Yep.
I have a question. You mentioned PSPX, which is the Doug module, which allows you to execute scripts written in Markdown.
Mm-hmm.
When you say scripts written in Markdown, do you mean just a Markdown file that's actually like, it could be PS1, but they just changed it to MD? Or is it like a Markdown formatted file with a PowerShell code little area and it executes that code?
So it's both. So he wrote it so that you could, if it's just a PS1, you could just rename it to an MD and it'll grab it and do that. Or he wrote it to where it'll go through and it'll grab the code block, so you can have all your other text in there and have it, be able to pull that down. One of the great uses I found for it is via Cloud Shell in the Azure portal. So you can open up a PowerShell window inside of Azure. The downside to it is you don't have all the things that you normally have on your local box, but you can use that to import those things in without having to copy over all these modules and files and scripts and things like that.
Cool. We're always connecting things in new, interesting ways with this whole PowerShell thing. Love to hear it. And that was definitely, that was a good 3. That was a healthy 3 right there.
It was 4, but
Very healthy 3.
But I don't know. There's a lot of that I'm excited to go. I actually wanted to go look at the PowerShell because I'm sure they did it better than I did. Because I wrote my blog like a month before all of the new improvements came to the Git web request.
Yeah, that's how I found it. I had started out writing some PowerShell for Spotify, and I'm like, man, their API is kind of,
Yeah.
a lot of paging, a lot of subqueries and things like that. I'm like, has somebody else thought about this yet? And 9 times out of 10 with PowerShell, the answer is usually yes. Somebody else has thought about this.
Well, it just goes back to maybe I shouldn't hate all of my ideas right away, because someone else probably did it way better, and it's well liked. I just need to I need to follow through on something. We'll see how that goes.
It's funny. I got into it originally because there's a radio station in San Antonio that my wife and I just love. It's like they stopped updating their playlist in like 1998. So every time we go visit my sister in San Antonio, the car would automatically be on that. It's the only time we ever listen to radios, when we went to San Antonio and listened to that station. So I wrote a thing that their website listed out what songs are currently playing. So I wrote a script that went and just randomly grabbed their website to see what they were building, and then I was like, oh, if I could put this into a Spotify list and kind of build it out from there.
All right. Well, Matt, I appreciate your time, but I have some information that I think we need to get out there about Andrew.
Okay.
I have talked him up a bit, some minor embellishment for his excellence in shilling, and people hear this and they assume that it's always been used for good. But did you know when Sauron built all those rings, he couldn't get anyone to take them? No one wanted them. So he hired Andrew to go extol the virtues of the rings, thus leading to the cataclysm and all those strife. So I, for one, am glad that he's turned over a new leaf and he's using it for good, but he's here to use all of that power to help us shill our podcast. Take it away, Andrew.
Well, Jordan, thank you for all the fancy words. I understood about half of those. I assume it was kind things you said. So continuing from there, thank you, audience, for listening. Give us 5 stars on your podcast player of choice and say some nice words in the comments section to help people discover it. Right, we're trying to spread this whole PowerShell thing, get more people embracing automation, trying to make the world more secure, all kinds of great stuff. Make sure to share that out. If you're checking us out on YouTube, leave a comment and a like there. Even subscribe for me. Hit it up. Why not? You can send us an email at powershell@pdq.com or tweet us at PowerShellPod on Twitter with feedback and kind things. Thank you to our esteemed guest, Matthew Dowst. Where can we keep track of you? Where can we follow you? Where are you?
The best place is probably Twitter. Pretty much everywhere. M Dowst, Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn. One of the benefits of having a weird last name is and being in tech is I always get my name for things. So it's pretty much M Dowst everywhere you look. And
Awesome.
Also my site Dowst.dev.
Yeah, we were actually marveling about that before you hopped on, how the main thing we learned about branding is using the same name across all platforms, and you've crushed it. Your branding is on point.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys. It's been great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I find it very fitting that the person who gives us 6 modules is the person responsible for compiling lists of everything all the time. It just goes to show you, if you haven't checked out the PowerShell Weekly yet, check it out. There's a lot of great stuff. You've put a lot of time and effort and curated your style, I guess you could almost say, over the years. And he features us there every week, so check it out. A lot of great stuff.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast with your hosts, Jordan Hammond and Andrew Plough.
It all makes sense now.
The PowerShell Podcast is a production of PDQ.com.